Hello, my name is MisSa. I'm a circus, sideshow, and variety performer specializing in the ancient art of sword soloing. I feel very lucky to travel the world with my profession and be able to earn a living. Before I start, just a disclaimer. Everything you're going to see in the next 5 minutes is very, very dangerous. So you have to promise me to not try this at home, okay? Here we go. 18-inch of beautiful stainless steel, 1 inch wide, with a sparkly handle. Almost sounds like a kitchen knife promo. Well, almost. Because who wants to be sliced up with a rusty knife? Not me. I only go for the good stuff. I can see questions in your eyes. The first question, how did she learn this? I opened my mouth, closed my eyes, and shoved it down. Second question, most of the time, where does the sword go, like anatomically, right? I opened my mouth and insert the sword to my throat, and it slides down the esophagus towards the heart. Are you with me? When it reaches the heart, it pushes the heart slightly to the left, and my short sword would then rest comfortably next to the heart. This longer one slides down the esophagus further, passing by the lungs, wiggling itself into the opening of my stomach, and then rests comfortably around that area. My longest sword would slide down all the way through my stomach and rest on the bottom of it. Now, another question I'm always asked is, how the hell did you end up with a profession like that? Bad grades in school, can't sit still in an office, didn't get accepted into acting school either. So the only thing that's left was sword soloing. Would you like to see it? Yes. Really? Yes. Music, please. Thank you. Now, for real, how the hell did I end up with a profession like this? I'm going to tell you, and this is my personal story on how dismantling fears and transforming them into creative energy has helped me to turn my life around from being a lost, ill girl into a successful performer with meaning and direction in life. When I was 1 year old, my mother decided to give me up for adoption. And my adoptive parents picked me up from the foster home to offer me a beautiful yet difficult childhood. I was very loved by my mother, but my father was rather distant and decided not to get involved into my upbringing too much. The support of my mother helped me growing up as the only black child in a complete white neighborhood. But still, I developed growing feelings of disconnection and loneliness. The only constant comfort I had was in the arts. When I was 14, I got asked in music studies to impersonate my favorite singer. So I dressed up as Tina Turner and lip-synced to Not Bush City Limits. This was the first time I performed a solo piece in front of an audience, and I knew from that day the stage is where I belong. I joined the school choir, but being the only black girl in class, I got told off for having a too loud voice and for not being a talented singer. So I quickly lost the confidence to continue. From then on, I started acting up in class to get attention. I got labeled a troublemaker, I fell out with my schoolmates, and I got bullied by others. As a result, my mother started changing me from one school into another, hoping the problems would vanish, but they only got worse. When I was 17, my adoptive mother died of cancer, leaving me to a family that had never really regarded me as one of them. They called me time-consuming, tiring, the ultimate reason my mom got ill. They blamed me for my mother's death. I couldn't handle these accusations and started to suffer from depression first, then developed an eating disorder called bulimia nervosa. To get away from the accusations, I decided to move to another city to start my own life. I worked full-time during the day, and at night I would go to school. In my free time, I was completely eaten up by my fears and sunk in my eating disorder. When I finally finished school, I was still cherishing the dream of being a performer. I spent a year in Amsterdam preparing for auditions at a famous dance and theater academy. But again, being the only black girl in class, I got told off for having crazy dance moves and not being good enough. With these shattered dreams, I didn't know what to do. The only thing that was certain was when I was traveling away from Germany, I wouldn't feel the pain as much. Still today, I deeply cherish being on the road. But back then, traveling wasn't healing. I feel I spent a decade on the run. Changing cities, changing jobs, moving from country to country. But in my free time, I wouldn't discover the world. Often, I wouldn't even leave my hotel room. I was eaten up by my fears and depressed. In 2007, I decided to come back to Germany. I had finally realized that my lifestyle was just feeding into my illness, and I wanted to come back to the problem to eliminate it. I reapproached my father, and we found a good way in talking to each other. But then he suddenly died, only 8 months after my return. At this point, I could have sunken even deeper into my illness, but instead, this became a major wake-up call for me. I stood in front of the mirror, and I looked at this ill, now grown woman, thinking, there must be a way out of this. I want to start living. Bulimia is a trap. For sufferers who suffer from bulimia for longer than 15 years before they get treatment for the first time, the doctors give a recovery rate of lower than 20%. 4% of death are related to heart failure, and a number of sufferers take their own lives. At this point, I had been in it for 13 years, and doctors gave me a recovery chance very, very low. But I knew the only way to do anything with my life was to recover fast. So I checked myself into a clinic, and it was a really long and painful process, and I remember I wanted to die several times. Altogether, my therapy took 24 months. And this is where I learned that fear triggers my insecurity, and that's the main factor fueling my anxiety. Slowly, I developed individual techniques how to eliminate them, mainly by discovering a fear, finding the core of it, and then using this knowledge to learn about myself and help me to develop out of that. When I got finally released out of hospital, doctors gave me a chance for more than 85% of full recovery. And for the first time, I felt really, really proud of my own achievements. Through this personal victory, I regained the confidence to pursue my dream of being a performer. In 2010, I moved to London, and for the next 5 years, I only worked towards my dream. First, performing in London's dirty underground clubs, then trying to gain recognition in smaller cabaret theaters. I was one of the very few black performers on the scene that time, and often got told I would never make it. Or my act got turned away from bigger bookings because apparently I was too exotic to be booked. At the same time, I watched new white performers getting help from local bookers and producers. It kept me wondering. So I settled with the welcoming underground performance world, where a black woman merely got booked for her so-called exotic looks rather than real talent. But at least I had the chance to experiment with new work. But the unrewarded work pushed me back into my insecurities, and I relapsed. Luckily, I had gained much useful knowledge in the 2 years of therapy that had prepared me for a moment like that. I started looking at my fears again. I so desperately wanted to turn this negative energy into something positive. That was the time where I slowly realized that embracing the things I had so hardly criticized for so hard all my life could help me snap out of a downward spiral. My different looks, my skin color, my voice, and the way I move so differently from everybody else are a gift. I could convince myself in believing this through realizing that these are also attributes that help me being such a good performer. Now I was determined to learn something extraordinary to stand out even more. First, I learned how to perform with fire. But then I got introduced to sword soloing through a colleague of mine who invited me to their show. It was love on first sight. I thought it was crazy that the human body could do something like that. I learned that sword soloing does not only require intensive training, but it's also very, very dangerous. I was sold. I felt I had defied death once while fighting my illness, and I was ready to do it again. Sword soloing is mastering fear. And it offered me a complete new experience of developing self-esteem. The accomplishment I felt when I allowed myself to swallow a sword for the first time showed me again, this time in a very extreme way, that fears can be transformed into something positive. I was ecstatic and practiced every day. 9 months later, my first job offer came around. Performing in London's most prestigious circus venue, 6 weeks, seven shows a week. I was really excited, but not quite ready. I had heard from other sword soloists to take up to 2 years of practice until going on stage. I thought that sounded a bit long, but as much as I could swallow the sword, I had not counted for the extra level of nervousness that's added to your stage time when performing a dangerous stunt. Every show was a roller coaster. I couldn't stand still, I felt hurried, I forgot to drink, I got dehydrated. I didn't take care of myself, and as a result, my throat was constantly swollen. Inevitably, it ended in an accident. One evening, I couldn't solo the sword properly, but I was so nervous I didn't evaluate the situation, so I took the sword out and tried again. Then I felt the pain. I knew instantly I was hurt. My boss rushed me to hospital, where I collapsed. For the next couple of weeks, I experienced the worst pain. I got injected with morphine every couple of hours, but that wasn't enough to suppress the pain. Luckily, the doctors decided not to operate, but I still had to wait for my injury to heal. When I came out on the other side, I was exhausted and skinny, but yet my first question for the doctors was, when can I go back on stage? I made a timeline, I ordered new props, I started making new costumes, and I visualized positive career moves. Stick to the timeline, and 2 months later, I was already back on stage. I developed little rituals to tackle stage fright and anxiety. Working actively through my fear helped me to come back as a stronger performer, now gaining respect within the industry. But my accident challenged me also intellectually. I was asking myself, why did I want to come back to the stage so desperately, and how could I give this passion a deeper meaning? From then on, I associated more with performers of color and their struggles of being recognized. I offered the emerging scene in London my art to support them and soon got booked onto their gigs. Hearing about stories similar to mine made me feel like coming home, and I found purpose in fighting for equality and against racism. Now finally, I could use my knowledge, which I acquired on my personal journey, to support other performers. And as Black performers on the international circuit are still a minority, every personal success would be a success for these group of people too. Dismantling my fears has helped me heal myself, learn an amazing circus skill, and find my place in society. Today, against all odds, I am 100% recovered from bulimia, and I have built a successful career in the arts. In fact, I'm one of the very few Black female performers signed in a leading role with a big European variety company. But besides my personal success, I have made it my mission to be an inspiration for aspiring performers of color to go their way, cutting through their fear, believing into themselves, and building a career in this predominantly white industry, no matter what they've been told. Thank you.